Just wanted to do a quick video here of what I did to my new window AC unit. This is a Midea 8000 BTU inverter window unit. It's U-shaped, which means the window will close around it. What I was trying to show here, and sorry I didn't video the installation of this, but I've got photos I'll show you later. I added this screen. This is 1/4-inch mesh screen, and I added it to protect the fins on the condenser from being bent, and because they're very, very easily bent. And of course, when you do that, you lose some efficiency of the condenser, the airflow. So I'll go through this, how I did it, but that'll have to be through video. But I will tell you that this top has to come off, and then this side has to be loosened up, which means there's 3 screws here in the top. There are 3 screws in the back, 2 screws on each end, and then there's 3 screws on the bottom. There's 2 over here and 1 over here. All those screws have to come out, and there are 2 types of screws, so pay attention when you're taking them out. There's a screw with a blunt end and a screw with a pointed end, and I believe the blunt end screw is these 3 up here on top, and I think it was these 2 down here, but now I've forgotten. So just pay attention when you take these out, which screws go where. Now the screws that are back here, of course, do this before you install it. The 3 screws that are back here are hard to get to because there's not a lot of space between the inside and the outside part of the unit. So I used a right angle Phillips screwdriver to loosen those up because they're in there pretty tight. You could also just use a Phillips driver to get in there and loosen it up. Use a wrench on here if you have to. The other thing I'll mention is these rails. This is on my porch, and these rails are probably going to give me a problem. I know I'm going to run into these with my leg, but I would imagine that these rails are kind of universal between their 3 sizes, and if you were mounting in a window where you weren't walking, such as here's my porch, well, this extra amount of bracket hanging out wouldn't matter. So I may end up cutting this off, just taking this part and moving it in and remounting it. But anyway, I'll decide on that later. It's just something to think about. Another thing to think about is the width that you can install these in without running into an issue. Is these things were made for 22 to 36 inches. And the reason I mention that is I installed an identical 8000 BTU unit for my neighbor, and his window was over 36 inches. So what happens is these blocks that they send to cover up the air gap, they're not long enough. And so I took styrofoam from the packing that the unit came in, and I cut longer blocks, and that worked out really well. So just something to think about if you have a window that's wider than 36 inches, is you can install this if you just use a little creativity. Now on the level, I've got this thing further out than they recommend. They recommend about, let's see here if I can get that they recommend having about that much tilt in it. And you see that's not much. That's just up about, I don't know, 1/16 of an inch. I've got quite a bit more tilt in it, and I'm going to leave it that way because that's the way I want it. Another thing to note is if you're trying to get that tilt exactly the way you want it, you can do course adjustment with the bracket. You know, that's down here. Okay, so you put these pins in and do the course adjustment to get the tilt the way you want it, and then you can do fine adjustment right here on the inner part of the bracket by these 3 screws. You choose which hole works best for you. Now I moved the screw all the way to the furthest hole here, this one here, because I was trying to move this bracket in as far as possible. But that's because I'm here on my porch. Okay, let's go to my computer and I'll show you the photos and discuss how I installed this. It's really easy. Okay, so here we are at my computer, and this is the 1/4 inch wire mesh that I cut. This piece, because it's for an 8,000 BTU unit, is 12 inches by 17 1/4. And if you have a 10 or a 12,000 BTU unit, you'll have to come up with your own measurements. Okay, in this mesh, you see right here at the bottom, 3rd row in, 3rd row up, I made a little bend with my needle nose pliers. That's where the screw goes. And the same way on the other side. This is the right hand side. There's 2 screws. I made a little bend. 3rd row up, 3rd row in, and then the 6th row up, 3rd row in. And the reason being is those screws from left to right didn't really come out to be a multiple of 1/4 inch. So I didn't want to cut this out, so I just bent it a little bit to make it fit. Alrighty, so here's where the screw goes in. Again, that's 3 rows in, 3 rows up. This is on the right hand side. The left hand side, screw at the bottom. And then you want to bend the last 1/2 inch, which is 2 rows. You want to bend that in just a little bit so that it has clearance to go around this foam piece, but don't bend it far enough that it contacts the copper tubing, because that might, with the vibration, wear a hole in it, and that'd obviously be a bad thing. Okay, this is on the left hand side. Again, just a little bit of bend in the last 2 rows of mesh. And you can see the mesh comes almost to the top. I could have made this a little bit taller, and hindsight being what it is, I could have also put a fold in the top just to stiffen this, the top of the mesh, but it really doesn't matter because it is covered up pretty well with the top of the cover. Okay, so now I've put the screws in. Now you want to start all of your screws all the way around, but don't tighten them down until you get them all in. There's the left, right, and really the cover does a good job. You could, if you wanted to, put more screws in this to hold it, but I don't think it's necessary. I'm just trying to prevent mainly our little furry friends that we have visit us from from mashing these fins on this coil. We have cats, we have coyotes, we have raccoons, possums, squirrels, armadillos, you name it. We've got them coming. And since this is so low to my porch, they could get up here and rub on this, and just investigate it and bend the coils up. Now, in my neighbor's house, he actually had bushes outside his window, and we cut those back, but of course as they grow they may brush up against this. And also he may have some hail that actually would contact his air conditioner, whereas mine won't. It's under a protected porch, but for his air conditioner this would also protect against hail damage. So I put one of these screens on his, and he has exactly the same 8,000 BTU unit as me. Anyway, just make sure that you get all the screws back in the right place, and after you get them all started, then tighten them all down, and really that's all there is to it. It's just a fairly simple fix for a potentially big problem. But anyway, hope that helps.